Well, hey guys, this is Jill. Thank you so much for joining me for World Watercolor Month 2023. I'm going to be painting for you every week this month, and along with a lot of other artists online. And so if you're interested in getting information on how to access all the videos that are going to be shared by a lot of different artists, check the information down in the video description. You'll find out how to access all of that. And if you're going to find yourself painting every week and you want to get a link for my video that I'm going to put up here every week, definitely let me know. There's information in the video's description on how to get on that list as well, and you'll get an inbox. You'll check your inbox every week for a link there, and you can check out the video. So let's get started. If you have not painted with World Watercolor Month Challenge before, basically it's 31 paintings in 31 days. I will be sharing only 5 videos this month, but each of the 31 days you're presented with a specific prompt. Again, information on that is in the description for the video, so you can get more information about that. But Sunlit is the first one. Okay, that's the one that I'm going to share with you today. And if you've not been with me before, you will find out that I'm traveling full-time in my RV with my husband, and we're visiting beautiful places and painting the things that we see. And the Grand Canyon is going to be our inspiration for today. So let me share just a video or a little picture with you right quick. This is an image from the Grand Canyon that I took just a few weeks ago. And we were absolutely blown away by the Grand Canyon. It's absolutely gorgeous. You are just surrounded by so much space, so much beauty, so much color, so much everything. And I found as an artist that was a little bit challenging and a little bit hard to paint because there's just so much to look at one time. And of course, over some time, I discovered that simplification is really the key. And so one of the things I want to share with you today is a little bit of an abstract approach on a complex subject like the Grand Canyon. And you will see in the photo that we're sharing here today, you know, this was an early morning. The light was coming in, just about to fill up the whole canyon with light. And so every time that we would go out and watch one of the sunsets, you know, the canyon acted like a giant bowl that would just, you know, the sun would come up and it would just pour into the canyon. And it was quite a sight. Every time, you know, you just never get tired of seeing it. But trying to paint that is a very difficult thing, but I want to share just a quick little sort of abstract technique with you today where I'm simplifying this subject really, really intensely, really moving it away from figurative work into abstraction, but it gives you this idea, this feeling, this mood of light spilling over, you know, over that canyon wall and into the canyon below, illuminating anything that's in its path, you know, the foliage, the rocks, whatever was there, just barely catching a little bit of light. So I think it's a fun technique, and it might take a little bit of practice, but I think you're going to enjoy this. So let's jump into it. I'm going to go right over to my work area, and let's kind of get started. So based on, you know, the image that we were just looking at, I'm really not going to do a sketch per se. I'm going to make a few little pencil lines to suggest, you know, maybe the top ridge of the canyon, just a simple little line, and maybe another canyon wall kind of coming down and moving over. And I'm going to try to just sort of indicate, just with a few little lines, just a little bit of foliage. And so that's kind of the extent of my drawing. I'm really kind of working from memory here, and I think it's best to do that. You'll have a fresher feel for it, but you can see it's a very simplistic type of sketch. And we're just going to work with this idea of light pouring in, okay? And one of the tools that you're going to find useful is your spray bottle to achieve a little bit of the effect that we're going to try to do. So I'm starting out with a number 12 round brush, and I'm going to get into some of my ultramarine blue. I want to get a nice puddle of that out here on my palette. And I'm working with Daniel Smith colors that are already, you know, squeezed out onto my palette. They're dry, but I'm reactivating them. If you want to work with color fresh out of the tube, certainly can do that as well. All right, so I've got a nice little puddle of my ultramarine blue. I also want to work with some quinacridone sienna. So that's another Daniel Smith color. I have some of that over here on the other corner of my palette. And I had some blue on my brush already. And that's kind of intentional. I was going to be mixing it with this quin sienna anyway to sort of get this warm, tawny brown, you know, that red sandstone color that we see, you know, in the canyon. And that's going to kind of get me started. All right, so I'm clearing out my brush so that I can kind of get ready to start the painting process. And the first thing I want to do is actually come onto my board with my sketch, and I want to pay attention to where my little horizon line was. I made it very, very light, but this kind of represents that top wall of the canyon, you know, of the Grand Canyon. But I'm going to spritz my page below that line. And I didn't fill the entire page with water. You can see I just spritzed it, and it's a very irregular pattern of water. And in fact, I enjoy using this type of sprayer instead of a little, you know, those little finger sprayers that are so tiny. I get a much irregular spray pattern with that. Kind of enjoy that. All right, so clean brush, and then I'm going to work into a little bit of my ultramarine blue. And I want to get just a little bit of this brown mixture, not a lot, but just kind of getting almost a grayish tone, a blue-gray sort of happening. And I'm going to lay the brush on its side. Okay, I'm painting with the belly of the brush. That's the rounded part here. Okay, I want to just lay it down on its side and make sure that I've got plenty loaded up, nice wet brush. And I'm just going to come across the page, and it's kind of skipping and moving a little bit, not really covering up everything, and just going all the way across. I've got a little bit of an irregular pattern there. And I want that. It's kind of illustrating that the light is being broken up and sort of making its way down into the canyon. And I'm just filling in sort of that first section and just letting that move. And what I want to do next, while that is still wet, is come in with a little bit of my brown mixture. This is my ultramarine blue and my quin sienna mixture, and just by memory I can remember that there were just certain little peaks and different shapes down in the canyon wall, down inside the canyon, and I'm just going to lay those in there very softly. And notice how I'm not going back in and doing a bunch of fiddling. I don't want to get into that. I'm going to soften this down here and let that continue to run. While this is all kind of wet, I wanted my light source coming in from this way. So I'm going to take my spritz bottle, and I'm holding my painting up at an angle, and on purpose I'm going to spray right down on top of that in that direction and let it sort of flow. And it's going to make a mess, and that's okay. I'm not worried about that. All right, just wipe that up. Okay, very, very soft. All right, so you can kind of see already we've just got this, you know, very vague shapes. That's exactly what, you know, landscapes give us, just a little bit of profile, just a little bit of silhouette information in low light. We kind of can tell that the canyon is there. We can tell that, you know, something is going on. And I'm going to tilt my board just a little bit more to encourage some more movement. I might even take my spray bottle and give another directional blast sort of down this way. There we go. Very nice. And notice I'm not getting in there and fiddling with anything. I don't want to do that. All right. Now I'm going to get my brush back out. And there's another canyon wall that was sort of coming across here, okay? You know, we're kind of thinking about it in those terms of just kind of working from memory. Stare at a photograph or stare at a scene for a little bit, you know, to do some of these types of paintings. And it just makes a little bit more interesting. Helps you to reach that abstraction while you're pulling from memory, something that you've studied really well. All right, so I've got this color that I'm using here is Quin Gold, actually, so it's a little bit of a yellowish color. It's also Daniel Smith. And I'm going to get just a little bit of this brown mixture that I had, just a tiny little bit. I just want to soften it because quinacridone gold, it's a pretty vivid color. I just want to mute it, tone it down just a little bit. And I'm just going to come right into my painting, and I can see where the edge of the canyon was. My pencil line is still there, and I'm just going to add some soft line to indicate that yellow, that extra bright tone. And I'm just kind of dropping it in here. I'm not trying to mix it with anything. I just want to keep a nice soft brush. And look at all of this glowing tone that I start to get. And that's one of the beautiful effects of quinacridone gold. It really loves to bleed and move into the other colors. It's absolutely fantastic. And again, no fiddling, no mixing, blending of colors. I just want it to be really soft, really fresh. All right, so there's some foliage down here. I kind of want to get into that. So I've got a color on my palette called Rare Green Earth. It's another color by Daniel Smith, and it's a greenish gray that has a nice granulation. If you don't have this color, it's okay. You can mix something sort of similar by using your ultramarine blue and a little bit of Hansa yellow, and maybe just a tiny little bit of your sienna, either burnt sienna or Quin sienna, to get that muted sort of grayish tone. So it's basically just a green that has been muted a little bit. So it's a beautiful gray-green color. And I just want to come into my painting here and begin, just making some marks to indicate this idea, this notion that there is some foliage, but I'm keeping my brush strokes really confident and not overworking. I just want to lay them in there. And this foliage you can even do a little bit of modeling, speckling if you want. I would be careful with splattering unless you feel like you can really control it, because we would have some splatter go into that area, and that's not what I'm going for. But just kind of making my way around with some foliage. There's trees that sort of are growing up out of the canyon, and you usually wind up just kind of grabbing them in your photographs. They're always right there in the corners or the foreground of your photos. You just kind of can't get away from them. All right, so I'm going to clear my brush out just a little. I'm going to get back into some of this Quin Gold that I had, this mixture that I had. I want to come, if we know that light is sort of spilling through here like this, I can actually come in and add a little bit of the Quin Gold right on the tips of this foliage to sort of create this idea, this notion that it's catching a little bit of light. There, don't want to overdo it, just kind of letting that move. All right, what I want to do right now, I'm going to take a little bit of salt. I want to control where this goes, so I'm actually just shaking it out in my hand so that I can kind of keep up with where it's going. And just on the leading edge of the foliage, I'm just going to sprinkle a few little bits. I don't want to cover up everything, but just kind of hit that leading edge of where that foliage. And it doesn't take much, just a few little bits. In fact, I'll hold it up so that you can see the coverage. You can kind of see how much I've put in there. It's not a whole lot, but you can see we've got really this already, just this sense of a lot of drama, of light, just coming into the canyon. All right, so we're just going to let this sit for just a little bit. I want to give the salt just a minute to begin doing its magic. and the salt is really reacting to the paint. The paint is reacting to the salt. They kind of react to each other. So, you know, the salt is actually repelling the water and then pulling some of the pigment into the granules, and that's how we wind up with those little starry, you know, star shapes, those little effects that we see. Okay, so I want all of this to kind of have a chance to just sit for a second. I want to start seeing a little bit of that starry, those little glowing bits kind of start happening in the pigment right there. And then I'm going to go ahead and blow dry what I have so that we can add another little layer of value so that we can kind of define our shapes just a little bit. We still want it to be a soft abstraction, but we can pull a little bit of value in there to really make this edge of this canyon wall kind of stand out just slightly. All right, so this has had some time for that salt to sort of do its thing. So I'm going to take just a second to dry what we have here. Okay, got everything nice and dry. So beautiful, just sweeping color softly. Just, you know, that light is just pouring into the canyon. I'm going to wipe away any salt that I have left over. And then I want to add just a couple of things that are going to help define and deepen a few values that are going to allow us to have a greater sense of form and for the edges of the canyon walls. All right, so I'm clearing out my brush. Again, this is just my number 12 round. And what I want to do here, I'm taking just water, a brush full of water, and I'm coming back into the painting and I'm just wetting this area that was my really light area. And I'm keeping, I still can see a little bit of my pencil underdrawing there, and I want to be able to sort of protect and preserve that canyon wall that's there. And there's a few little highlights that I'm just adding out here. The canyon has got all these different ridges, and so everywhere that I want it to stay light, I'm actually adding a little bit of water. You can see where the water is and kind of where it stops. You can see I was careful to preserve that little canyon wall, this one that's right here in the front. So I'm going to get back into my original sort of gray, bluish gray mixture that I started with. And I'm not going to work in this area where it's wet, but coming in from the other side, again, painting with the belly of my brush, bringing some of that darker, it's just a little slightly darker, bringing it in till it makes contact with where I've wet the page. And just letting that kind of run. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, down low. Kind of going around all those little treetops. There we go. Just really soft. And you can kind of tilt your board back and forth to encourage just that soft gradient. Got a little bit of a little strand from my brush stuck in there. There we go. All right, while that's still kind of wet in here, I'm going to get back into this blue-gray mixture. A little bit of the red, the brownish red that I had in here, and kind of reinforce just in a few little spots. You know, that's one of the really interesting things about seeing the walls of the canyon and all the different little shapes that were happening down in there. You just get these little suggestions of shape. They're just so soft and so subtle. And I'm going to tilt my board to encourage movement. And see, they almost just kind of disappear. Not really disappear, but they become so soft. There we go. Alright, and then I'm also going to take just a damp brush, just a little bit of water, and I'm going to come right around this edge of my canyon wall just to soften that little stroke that was beginning to form, a little bit of a hard edge there. Alright, so now I'm going to use something that maybe you've maybe used it before, maybe you haven't, but this is just some paraffin wax. There's information in the video description about it if you want to learn more. But I'm going to use it as a resist to just kind of come in here. I'm not using it to make tree trunks or anything like that, but I kind of want to look at the shapes that I already have in my painting. I tell my students all the time, paint the painting that you've got, work with the shapes that are here, you know, coordinate, partner with your materials, with the painting that's forming. And I'm actually making some lines around some of these darker shapes. And before you follow along on this, you could kind of watch exactly how this turns out. When you're drawing with the paraffin, it's pretty transparent. You don't really see it, so you can kind of see a little silky line that it does that forms when you're using it, but it'll show up more right here when I start to add some more pigment. So I'm going to get back into that same green-gray color, the rare green earth, and I'm going to come into the painting and kind of go over. I'm using this is a dagger brush, a Princeton 1/4 inch dagger brush, and I'm just using that gray-green color, that rare green earth, to come right into the bottom of the foliage here to just add a little bit more depth of color, but I'm getting a nice resist where the wax was, and just with some clear water smoothing around the edges just a little. But look at all of the resist, all of those waxy lines that are left in the foliage. It makes a fantastic just visual texture, you know, that's there that serves you really well and lets you know that something is going on in there. Even though I might not be able to see exactly what's going on, I can tell that there's textures. I'm going to get back into my blue. This is my ultramarine, and I'm kind of just mixing it with a little bit of mud that was on my palette. But I want a little bit of cool blue to kind of come back into this foreground area just a little bit. In the shadow areas, okay, not where the sun is catching it. We'd want it to be down low in the shadows. And that helps to reinforce that really vivid light that's coming up top side. All right, I'm just going to move my board to encourage a little bit of movement. There we go. I'm going to go all the way around, just clean up my tape so I don't have any paint sort of sneak back in and create little micro disasters. Sometimes they're okay, but I kind of don't want anything coming back into this just now. All right, while this is all still kind of damp, I can tell that it's damp, you know, just by the sheen that's on my paper. Just a tiny little bit of sheen. If your paper is, if it has dried all the way, you don't want to get into this step. But I'm using some of this grayish blue, and I'm just kind of coming in with a smaller brush to control how much I'm adding, how much paint, how much water I'm adding, and just sort of giving myself a little extra deeper value right here. And if you notice, I even left the white of the paper to represent sunlight hitting the foliage here. And so, you know, the deeper you go into the canyon as the light starts spilling through, it's really vivid. But there are sections on either side of that big shaft of light coming through that are really dark. So I'm just reinforcing the darkness on each side. And kind of creating some imagined, you know, little canyon shadows in here. I don't want to overdo it, but just slightly. You can see I just sort of made a few little imagined shadow shapes of distant canyon wall out there. Very good. All right, so I'm ready to dry this now. Okay, now that I've got that dry, I want to add just one more little extra thing. You know, when the light is pouring in, it's spilling down into the canyon, down into this hole. But this little canyon wall that's here is something that's closer to us and is going to block off the spilling of that light to some degree. So I'm just using my smaller brush to wet the edge of what is this canyon wall. This is I love this brush. It's a little 1/4 inch Princeton dagger, and I really love using it. So I'm going to hold this up so you can see where I put the water. You can see where it's wet, just following the contour of that canyon wall. And then I'm going to take a little bit of this tan, or this brown that's here. I'm going to mix it with that quinacridone gold that's here, and I just want to put a few little suggestions of edge. Okay, I don't want it to be a hard edge. It's still an edge that's being illuminated by, by light, but it's still very soft. And I'm even using a little bit of a dry brush, just like how I use dry brush across the top. I'm using that same idea, a little bit of dry brush across here to sort of emulate the idea that light is catching. Just a little texture, that's all I'm doing, just a little dry brush. There we go, very soft. You can see how soft that is. And then I'm actually going to use my sprayer, not to spray this hard line that I've made, but just below it, just so that it kind of blends in with everything else below it. And look at that canyon wall just standing there right behind all of that light pouring in. It's just kind of magical. Alright, so one more dry and I think we're done. Okay, I'm going to risk something. If you've painted with me long enough, you know that we're going to take a risk. So, in looking at this, I'm wanting a little bit more drama. I think I want one of these rays of light to maybe spill a little bit over across the top of this, maybe kind of in this general direction. So, I'm going to hold my board and I'm going to use my spray bottle to aim a blast, of water kind of coming across here. There we go. I'm going to let that pour off. And I'm just taking my tissue, my paper towel is actually a little bit damp from just painting. And even if it wasn't, I can dab a little bit of water here. And just very carefully, just kind of wipe across there. And it gave me just an extra little ray kind of coming across the top, but not just going kind of crazy with it. We don't want it to have, we don't want those kindergarten drawings where you have the big massive lines that represent the bolts of the rays coming out of the sun. We just want it to be really, really soft. And I'll hold it up. You can see how soft it is. Very, very subtle. Alright, so now let's dry, and then I think we're officially done with that. All right, fantastic. So I think that that was a risk that really, really paid off. If you notice, we didn't add any color to the sky. We have left it white. I think that kind of helps to add to the, it's an abstract quality, and it also kind of adds to the fact that the light is absolutely filled. You know, the sky is just filled with light, so we're going to, you know, kind of be dealing with it in that way. I've just left it completely white because that's really what's coming through. So if we take a look, you know, between these two, if we look at our kind of the inspiration photo, you know, compared to the painting, you know, we can see that, you know, we're inspired. The colors are showing back up again. The textures are kind of showing back up again. But look at all of the simplification. It really makes a difference, especially for me as a watercolorist, and especially someone who enjoys painting outside. You know, there's a point at which you have to decide, you know, how much detail am I going to go for, or do I really want to just try to capture the part, you know, of the scene that was really the most moving, which is the light, you know, spilling into the canyon wall the way that it was. So I hope that this was entertaining for you. I hope it was informative, and I think that it was fun to take the risks and just kind of see what we come up with. So I hope that you will join me for the other videos that I've got this month. If you need information about painting with any of the artists this month or with me, just check out the description in the video, and there's plenty of information there for you to dig into, and I will also have some information about that wax as well. So take a look there, and hopefully I will see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.